Hello and welcome to the February 25th edition of the Bud Report. This week, we take a deep dive into the circumstances that led to the capture of 3 Grenadian criminal fugitives in the neighboring jurisdiction of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The 3 men who escaped from the South St. George police station on February 18th is also believed to be responsible for the alleged murder of Kathy Brandell and Ralph Hendry, owners of the SV Simplicity Catamaran. The couple, who were in their 60s, lived aboard their vessel and were enjoying a once-in-a-lifetime trip, which they have been planning for 12 years, according to reporting from the WPT Channel 5 in Florida. WTP, quoting Hendry's sister, Sue Ellen Desmarius, said, quote, "This was their whole life. They didn't own another home. They didn't own cars. They simply owned simplicity," unquote. So how did the escape of these 3 seasoned criminals with previous histories of rape and robbery lead them on the Catamaran? This timeline begins on the evening of Sunday, February 18th, and their sister picks up the story.
There's got to be a reason for this. So maybe being here, we're saving somebody else. What if Ralph's boat hadn't been there that day? What if he hadn't gone into town? Would it have been the next boat over?
The first indication that something was awry on the Catamaran came from data pulled from the automatic identification system installed on the vessel. An AIS transceiver automatically broadcasts key information about marine vehicles, including its identification, position, speed, and navigational status. At around 10 p.m. on Sunday the 18th, the vessel left its mooring on Grenadines Beach at watt speed, which is the maximum speed of any marine vessel. In the case of this type of catamaran, they can sail at maximum speeds of up to 30 knots. A user in the group Grenada Cruisers posted an update on February 19th stating, quote, "Ralph and Kathy were extremely fair-weather sailors and slow everywhere. The route, weather, and speeds they took were not indicative of their actions," unquote. 3 days after the boat's abduction in Grenada, a cruising skipper sailing off the southern coast of St. Vincent and the Grenadines found the abandoned vessel off the coast of Wallaboo Bay on the south central coast of St. Vincent. The skipper who boarded the boat discovered bloodstains and a ransacked interior cabin, with its occupants missing. This Good Samaritan then contacted the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Coast Guard and local law enforcement there, who commenced their investigations. Later on that day, members of the Narcotics and Rapid Response Unit of the Royal St. Vincent and the Grenadines Police Force recaptured the Grenadian fugitives in the northwestern village of Petit Bordel, 8.5 miles away from the location of the abandoned vessel. The suspects are currently in Vincentian custody as the investigations continue. Now, in January and February alone, there have been 5 yacht-related crimes in Grenada, with the most recent incidents involving the theft of 2 dinghies on February 10th off the coast of Sandy Island and in Prickly Bay on February 11th. On February 14th, a sailor reported a burglary at the Clarksville Bay Marina. Now, the last public communication on this high-profile case from local authorities in Grenada was published on February 22nd, confirming the escape of the 3 men and a 4th accused murderer who escaped protective police custody while attending a hearing at the Grenville Magistrates Court, having been accused of the murder of Canadian citizen Wayne Smart. On February 22nd, members of the local media in Grenada were initially invited to an RGPF press briefing to be hosted by HCP Vanny Kerwin at 11 a.m., which was then rescheduled for 3 p.m., but which was later cancelled. Later on our program, we sit with two veteran Caribbean journalists to discuss the state of media in the Caribbean against the backdrop of increasing attempts by some Caribbean governments to speak directly to their constituents via social media, as well as the increasing popularity of political programs that sometimes dwarfs the role of journalists in the public sphere. Last week, Grenadian Media Workers Association First Vice President Callistra Faria chastised the Deacon Mitchell administration for requesting that journalists submit questions in advance to be vetted by its communications team before interviews are to be granted.
I've never had that request, and I want to make an appeal to the Prime Minister now. If he has set that policy, that he needs to reverse it. And if someone under him who doesn't understand their role has decided to do that, then they may want to not create that sort of difficulty for the Prime Minister and accept that we won't give you questions.
Faria called these attempts an affront to press freedom. We welcome our guests, Trevor Bailey, Assistant Commissioner of Police of the Royal St. Vincent and the Grenadines Police Force, Chris Doyle, veteran sailor and editor of the book Sailor's Guide to the Windward Islands, Peter David, Member of Parliament for the town of St. George, Callistra Faria, First Vice President of the Media Workers Association of Grenada, and Peter Richards, Editor-in-Chief of the Caribbean Media Corporation. Viewers and listeners, a pleasant good morning to one and all, and we welcome you to this week's episode of the Bub Report. Please remember to like and share this live stream so others can join this very important conversation that we're having this morning. Now, in fact, we will actually go to the second segment first because we have to respect the time of one of our guests. And actually, two of our guests are here. That's Mr. Peter Richards. Mr. Peter Richards, who is the editor-in-chief of the Caribbean Media Corporation. Mr. Richards is currently covering the CARICOM Summit in Georgetown, Guyana, and he does have to leave earlier in order to attend a press conference that has been hosted by members of the CARICOM heads there in Georgetown, Guyana. And we are joined by Ms. Callistra Faria, who is the first Vice President of the Media Workers Association of Grenada. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Bub Report.
Thank you. Good morning to you, and good morning to your viewers and listeners.
Absolutely. And my Callistra, it's good to have you here as well.
It's good to be on. It's good to be on. Good morning, Peter. Good morning to the viewers and listeners of the Bub Report. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I gathered you here, Callistra, because you made some news of your own at the Media Awards last week, in respect of a statement that you made that you are being asked and other journalists are being asked to submit questions to the Prime Minister to be vetted before you can be granted interviews. Now, I brought Peter Richards here because he's also a veteran in the business. Now, your comments also elicited some reaction from the apologists of the administration who are saying, well, the administration does not need media. We don't need media. We can communicate to our constituents directly. Media are becoming irrelevant and obsolete in this social media isolated world. So we felt it was important to bring the both of you here together to talk about these developments. But Peter, I want to begin with you. I am going to break protocol and not say ladies first, only for this time, because I want to respect your time. But I wanted to react to the comments that was made by Ms. Callistra Faria at the Media Awards in Grenada.
Well, that's not new for me, for Grenada, as a matter of fact. I remember coming to Grenada at the time. Prime Minister Tillman Thomas was head of government to cover the general elections in Grenada. I've been covering general elections in Grenada for a long time. And surprise, surprise, I asked the then Prime Minister's press secretary, Richard Simon, ironically, we used to work together at Radio Antilles, and I found it so strange as his news editor then, he was the press secretary to Prime Minister Tillman Thomas, and I asked for an interview with Prime Minister Tillman Thomas, and Richard Simon looked at me and said, "Well, you could only get the interview if you submit the questions beforehand." I laughed because I thought he was joking, and he was serious. I simply bypassed him because I knew Prime Minister Thomas well. I called Prime Minister Tillman Thomas, and then I went in to do the interview. But again, I want to put it into context. The situation. I'm also the how do you call it? The one of the founding members of the Association of Caribbean Media Workers, ACM. And we used to be sending delegations, including me, Wesley Gibbons, and what have you, to meet with Grenadian leaders on the whole question of media Grenada government relations. I think the problem arises simply because in many instances you have where, as in this case, the Prime Minister's press secretary is not somebody who, as I would say in the local palace, acquaint with media operations. They do not respect the media. I remember again another situation. I don't want to harp on Richard Simon, but if you could recall Roll Titus, he used to be editor of the Grenada a Grenada newspaper being published by the Barbados Advocate newspaper. And he lost his job simply because Richard Simon called Rawls bosses in Barbados, demanding a retraction of a story, and he also wanted an apology. So I think we are seeing that creeping in. It is not something new to Grenada. We see it creeping into the Caribbean media landscape. Yes. And one thing they have to be very certain and very careful about. Yes, we're opening up ourselves to social media, but social media with all its ills as well, because you need media for factual. Anybody could write anything on social media. And if the politicians believe that, it's better for them to deal with just dealing directly to the constituents through social media, I know they have something coming. We all have to deal with what's coming in for example, in the form of AI. Will the politicians be able to control AI in the future? These are just my opening statement for you.
Absolutely, and I'll bring in Callistra here. Callistra, now the apologists for the administration would say, so what? So what? You have to submit your questions before, or some of them would say, well, we don't need you. Who do you think you are, Callistra Faria? On what grounds do you stand on as a journalist? In fact, the media in Grenada, they have no credibility. You know, they eat a food bunch. So therefore, you guys have no relevance in this democracy. That is what they would say. In fact, one of their chief propagandists, I'm not going to mention his name here, he was justifying the assault that was meted out against you by the previous administration. So let's talk about media relevance. How do we stay relevant in this environment?
Well, first, one of the chief spokespersons for the administration did ask, who do I think I am? Well, who I am is a journalist with more than 25 years of experience, training, and qualifications in media. So let's get that out of the way. But Callan, I sent you some text messages, because I think one of the things that's happening with this situation is that people are questioning whether or not this actually happened. And I sent you some messages. I don't know if your producers are able to put it up in queue, so you can put it up on the screen. You're welcome to do that if you want to. The exchange between the press secretary and myself and the executive assistant to the prime minister. No, that one is a doozy. Her response is absolutely epic. What is happening is that the situation is worrying. As Peter said, we've had a long history of governments trying to suppress the media. And, you know, the ironic thing is that the NDC is fond of saying that they are the greatest friends of the media, and one might have thought so. Under the Tillman Thomas administration, they removed criminal libel from the books, and they've been waving that up as their big success for press freedom. But it goes deeper than that. What do you do to allow a free press to operate in the country? That is very important. The window dressing does not matter to me when I am told by the press secretary that the only way you can get an interview with the Prime Minister is if I give you my questions ahead of time. For me, that is unacceptable. It goes against my training, for one thing. And you know, that sort of policy, because it seems to be policy now based on the response that came from the Prime Minister's office, it is inimical to press freedom and to be waving the flag, the pride flag for democracy. So I hope that the Prime Minister will take a second look at it. What is also worrying is that while you do not hear from the government open attacks on the media, on press freedom, like the old days when, you know, I was seen in photographs sitting flat on my butt at the headquarters of the government with a minister over me, menacingly standing over me, or political supporters of the New National Party attempting to punch me, luckily getting my tablet instead of me. While that is not happening again, what you're seeing is an assault of media and members of the public who may be critical of the government, who may be asking for more in terms of, you know, living up to your mandate and living up to what is required of you. And the silence from the administration, it is an enabling silence. And so they have not stopped. They have become more intense in their attacks and their slander and defamation on social media. And I think that also demonstrates how this administration is seeking to use social media to as a weapon to sideline the mainstream media from the conversation, to make it appear as if we are irrelevant. Now, I firmly believe that by the time the next elections rolls around, we will become extremely relevant in their eyes again. But for now,
well,
you know,
before you go on,
yes, Peter, go ahead, jump in,
I find it so interesting. The last general election that was held in Grenada, I came across to cover the election. But before I came across, I called the now Prime Minister, Dickon Mitchell, and we had a Zoom interview. In fact, I believe I was the only regional person at the time, because nobody knew who he was or what he was. And we had a very fantastic interview. I wrote the story. We ran it on CMC. We even ran the interview and what have you on CMC. And so I said, okay, I came across, cover the elections. Then I met him in Trinidad at the CARICOM Heads of Government Conference. And he was entering the building and I was also entering at the same time. So I said, hi, good day, Mr. Mitchell. Before I could even finish, he looked at me and he said, well, speak to my press secretary if you want an interview. And I laughed. And I said to myself, but I mean, this is so ridiculous. I am trying to, first time I think we would have met physically outside of the election scenario. And the first thing he puts up into his head is, if you want an interview with me, call his press secretary. I guess during the press conference, during the summit, he would have noticed that I was moving around and speaking to all the prime ministers without even asking. I mean, some of them know me by now because I've been covering CARICOM summits for years, that they know me well enough to know, hey, that we could speak. And I'm certain he would have asked his friends, like Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerritt, the Prime Minister St. Lucia, Philip Pierre, and what have you. Who is this person? And I just laughed. And going back to the fact that submit questions, I have an answer for that. I always tell my journalists, my reporters, my correspondents throughout the Caribbean, if they ever ask you for questions and they insist on asking you for questions, submit the question. Submit any other type of question, but always make sure your first question is, "How are you today?" Because when you go into this interview with them, and they are waiting for you to speak on, because they would have a list of questions, and your first question is, "How are you today?" And then they say, "Well, I'm fine," and this. Then you go into what you act, because you're already there. So they can't say they're not going to do the conference because you're already there. They making it worse if you're recording them, so you already have them where you want them to be. So if they want questions, just submit questions to them. Ask them any stupid questions. Although they say you're never embarrassed by a question, but you're likely to be embarrassed by the answer.
But to me, there is also a hypocrisy here, because during the last elections, in fact, the Prime Minister singled myself and Callistra out, as well as Odette Campbell of blessed memory at the time, and he said, the current Prime Minister at that time,
you're speaking to me right now, because on my system I'm not seeing or hearing you. You know my Grenada internet troubles.
Yes, but
so
let me go.
I'm not hearing.
Let me go to Peter. Peter, are you hearing? Are you hearing me?
Yes,
so Callistra, definitely you have some internet issues there. Okay, the question I'm asking is, or just an observation, during the last election, Prime Minister, the Honorable Deacon Mitchell, he said that government ministers of the previous administration, including the Prime Minister at the time, Dr. Keith Mitchell, would not go on the Bub Report, they would not go on the narrative, they would not go on beyond the headlines. So as to challenge at the time the previous administration to come on these platforms, how much have the tables turned? How have the tables turned, Callistra?
Well, I mean, it's a drastic turn. I'm getting messages, and I'm going to look sideways a little bit to read this off of my laptop here, where the executive assistant to the secretary to the Prime Minister, whatever, says to me, the press secretary is the voice of the Prime Minister. Thus, whatever she conveys will stand or be the policy on behalf of the Prime Minister. This is part of correspondence that I got during the 2 weeks leading up to what I said last Sunday night, trying to resolve this, trying to explain. The press secretary, she's fairly new. I have not had an interview with the Prime Minister since she became press secretary. Of course, I've been waiting for 3 months to get a date, which in itself is unusual. I guess maybe I was a bit spoiled that I was able to interview the Prime Minister fairly regularly for a Prime Minister. Although I do get to interview other Prime Ministers as Peter as well. It's so this situation is just totally different from the beginning, from when he became political leader, when he was so available and trying to be known, trying to make his bones, trying to get out there. And in the early days of his administration to what is happening now, where you're told, submit your questions. And, Peter talked about, well, we can just give them some questions that, just send anything and then you ask what you want to ask. They're sitting in front of you, and even if they decide, well, I am not going to answer the questions that you're asking because you didn't give me before, you've got that on tape as well, and that becomes news, obviously. But I just feel like there is a difficulty making that a condition of the interview, particularly, Kellan, when you provide the areas that you wish to discuss. The Prime Minister is about to take over the chairmanship of CARICOM in a few months' time. One of the areas that I put on the list that I set them was full freedom of movement, which the leaders are targeting to put some teeth into by March 31. He's getting ready to take over the whole kit and caboodle in a few months. So how do you have difficulty with an area like that? Law and order. The country's on fire. There are guns everywhere. The Minister of National Security does not need specific questions to be prepared to talk about law and order in his country. He's supposed to be on the ball with that. So what is there to fear and worry about? No matter what a journalist throws at you on law and order in Grenada right now as the Minister of National Security, you need to be up to speed because you have a crisis on your hand. And just by fulfilling your job, you need to be up to speed on that. Those are some of the areas. Dr. Alexis's proposal for the constitutional change So I sent a list of topics that I needed. And the response I kept getting over is that we need the specific questions until this final one where she says, in the absence of questions, we will not be able to facilitate. So it has changed very much. And the enabling
Peter?
of the spokespersons for the government under the excuse that, they're independent operators, and they can, even if they're attacking the media and committing slander, then there's nothing we can do. They don't speak for us, but they do speak for the news.
Peter?
What I hope he would be getting is how they say his batting practice in order quickly, because as Caristia points out, he will be the CARICOM's chairman and CARICOM spokesman on issues. And if we send him, or if we ask him, because if we ask him a question as CARICOM chairman and he refuses or want to know the questions in advance, well, he'll know, the story will not be confined to Grenada. It will be a CARICOM issue as to why, because we had, I could remember having an episode with a former Bahamas Prime Minister at a CARICOM press conference. And I asked him a question, and he turned around and said, well, look, I just finished answering this question, and so we'll move on. I stopped him and I said, hey, sir, please. This pretty young lady that's in the corner, and he had a very beautiful a pretty young lady as his press secretary. I turned to him and I said, sir, this lady over there is your press secretary. You could tell her that because she works for the Bahamas government. But as you there representing CARICOM, let me rephrase the question for you again. When I asked him the question, he looked at me, and by that time, then Edwin Carrington was CARICOM secretary, Patrick Manning, and then was alive, and Patrick was there. And Ricky Singh, and he looked at me, and then he answered the question. So afterwards, I came to him and I said, sir, I'm not interested in your private or in your domestic issues. I'm asking you an issue on CARICOM. So I hope you answer in future. I hope you take it in the sense in which it was going forward. And I hope this will happen with Mr. Mitchell. I don't think his press secretary, who says that when she speaks for him as policy. I hope this is not going to be extended to CARICOM, or else it's going to be, a field to play with.
Yeah, but it's always for me, it's always a hypocrisy, because, and I would say this again, if this was Dr. the Right Honorable Keith Mitchell, Grenada's longest serving prime minister, who said to the media or in Grenada that you are to submit questions for me that are to be vetted in order for me to get access to you, rest assured, the National Democratic Congress, under the leadership of the Honorable Tillman Thomas, former Prime Minister, who himself was a journalist in Grenada, who was imprisoned in respect of the principles of the free press in Grenada, would be having a press conference, crying censorship, crying an affront to press freedom in Grenada. I assure you. But what do we see now? The people who were once praising Calistro Faria, the people who were once cheerleading for Calistro Faria, now see Calistro Faria as a villain, as a demon, as someone who is a thorn in the side of the Prime Minister. But I suppose that is what the journalist should be. I believe no journalist should be cozy with any politician, irrespective of which party they belong to.
One of the things I want to point out also,
yes,
is that, as Carissa pointed out, and it happened not only in Grenada, but across some of the Caribbean countries, where you have journalists who, for want of a better word, would sell out the profession. They become even while they are working for private media, they become spokespeople, or they edit their stories to suit either a certain politician, whether it's opposition or government. So therefore you lose that respect. Therefore the politician then would lose that respect for you. And another thing, you always find when in opposition, the politicians are very open to you. And as soon as they get into office, the first thing they change is their phone number, so you can't reach them. It means.
And that's just the nature of politics, and the same thing happens. So, and this is why journalists are not supposed to be unwittingly co-opted by any politician of any side. But unfortunately, in the context of Grenada, and it pains me to say this, but we are part of the legacy of the eat a food economy, some journalists, where they have sold their souls and they have sold their journalistic integrity. Kalishtra,
Tell on, let me jump in here, right? I don't
Yes.
know if someone who goes on the payroll of a political party or for some sort of benefit panders to a political party and breaks the rules of the job. I don't know if we can continue to call them journalists, because a journalist comes with a set of responsibilities and ethics that must be followed. A doctor is no longer a doctor if he does not meet the requirements of the license that he has to get to practice. And it's the same. So we keep saying journalists are in the pockets of politicians, whoever they are. I don't think they're journalists anymore. And that causes a problem. That definition causes a problem for someone like me who has sat on the front line of press freedom all throughout my career and have the scars to show it. I remember in 2013 when the NNP sent again, there was a news conference, and I'd been very critical of the NBC during the 2000 and in the latter part of the 2008 term, because I needed to report what was happening. And after the news conference, one of the first news conferences the NNP administration had, a minister came up to me and he said, "Kalishtra, what was that? I thought we were friends," because he had some sort of expectation that because I had brought the information to the public as I felt they needed to know, that I was somehow in some sort of love fest with them, and that my line of questioning would change, and that I'd go soft on them or something like that. And so he was surprised. And then after that news conference, well, the rest of it happened. Me on the ground with a minister standing over me, and people trying to punch me, and some of the worst slander ever. But none of it actionable yet, unfortunately, or I've taken some people to court. So it is, for me, the point, and another point I want to make here, I want to just say, Kellon, because I'm sure running out of time, and Peter has to go, is I was very concerned for this country when I heard a spokesperson, someone sent me the clips, I don't listen to that. When I heard a spokesperson for the NDC party and the NDC administration celebrating the incident with Winston Garraway and myself, the 2018 incident.
Yes.
That is shameful. It is shameless. It is ugly that no matter how angry you are, you cannot, number one, celebrate violence against women, gender-based violence, and certainly not violence against the media. Not if you want to continue to stand on this pedestal of free press and you're the government that is so friendly and supportive of free press. I mean, the currency of Tillman Thomas has changed in the legislation that deals with criminal libel. That currency is very quickly running out, if there's any left at all, because of things like that. Because you can't say that people are not your spokesperson, but then you line up to the event and you pose and you take pictures. I see you associating yourself with that. I see you putting them in positions where mainstream media is supposed to be. And I see you anointing and accepting them and trying to make them into a media person and trying to make them part of your camp, associating with them. And so I consider you to be speaking on behalf of the administration. And I stand here today to say that the National Democratic Congress is now supporting Winston Garraway's attack on me.
Right.
So,
and
to your earlier question, what a change.
Yes.
It's a big change.
Peter Richards, over to you for some final comments, because we have to get to the second segment of the program.
I want us in the Caribbean to realize that what we've seen happening in the Caribbean with regards to how politicians treat media, this is nothing new, quote unquote, in our so-called Western democracies and free world and what have you. But at the same time, that is why many people question, is journalism a profession? Some people say, well, for you to call it a profession, it means you therefore have to go through some exams, get qualified and what have you. And another problem that pushes the problem is that many of the media houses in the Caribbean, and I mean, if not all, they do not encourage training at the highest level for their staff, for the reporters. In many cases, it's just a job, and some of the staff people enter the profession and say, hey, I'm in it, but I am only looking to move on, get noted, and move on. And that is one of the problems also hurting the profession. And at the same time, if we do not respect ourselves, if we do not show ourselves to be professionals, then we'll always be open. I mean, I like I said, I could stand up to any prime minister in the Caribbean and speak without any fear or favor of any one of them saying, but I gave you something, or you in my back pocket, or anything like that. Nothing of that sort.
Well, Peter, I can actually proudly say the same. Now, I can't say the same for some people, and I'm not including Callistra in this here. Forgive me, Callistra. But there are many journalists across the Caribbean who sometimes can say that, because I believe they forget what their role is. And of course, while we chastise and critique journalists, we have to remember that journalists work for media houses. They work for corporations. They work for companies.
Yeah, who are looking at bottom
right?
line.
And so you know, for people to suggest that, and then we have a person here, Terry Alexander, who I will be blocking because Dr. Keith Mitchell never gave me any money. So please have some respect for this platform. Go take your bow somewhere else. Okay? So Peter Richards, thank you so much for appearing on this week's edition of the Bub Report. Callistra, any final comments from you?
Well, you know, the fact that I was able to stand on that podium on Sunday night and say what I said, and shows that I'm not in anybody's back pocket. It doesn't matter who I stand next to and take a photograph. I'm not in anybody's back pocket. I am still standing where I've always been standing, on the side of the profession, press freedom, and truth. Comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable.
Absolutely. Callistra, thank you so very much. Viewers and listeners, Callistra Farrier and Mr. Peter Richards. Callistra Farrier, Peter Richards. Callistra, the first Vice President of the Media Workers Association of Grenada, and Mr. Peter Richards, the Editor-in-Chief of the Caribbean Media Corporation. Viewers and listeners, we will take a quick break and come back with a very important segment that has been animating national conversation, not only in Grenada, but in our neighboring St. Vincent and the Grenadines, as well as in the sailing community. We're going to take a quick break and come back for this very important conversation. Please stand by. Hi, everyone. Thanks for checking out the Bub Report's social media pages. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch our weekly live show, follow our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can catch repeat episodes on Wednesdays at 4 and 5 p.m. respectively on CRFM Radio and GBN TV in Grenada. We are also viewed on Sundays at 8 p.m. on WPG10 throughout the Caribbean. Thanks for watching.
Listeners, I see Michael already smiling. He anticipates what I would say. My good friend.
Yeah, and I put my head on a block, and I offer Mr. Brother Bishop the scalpel to cut it off.
The political leader has said several times up to last night that that is not a reflection of her personal views or the views of the party. and you understand, George, how elections at the party level work.
So, Dr. Pay, do you have ties? Do you have ties to the National Democratic Congress, Dr. Pay? Or rather, were you commissioned by the NDC to do this poll?
Information because it seems interesting that a lot of your advice is very consistent with what was said. Brilliant.
And Claudette, good luck with everything.
You too, man.
May the best candidate win in the town of St. George.
But kill on.
Yes.
You is a tongue man too, so stop it. Tell everybody you are a tongue man too.
We are a people who have always aspired for more. We've always aspired to do better. We've always accepted that not because your mother didn't go to secondary school, you should go. It has always been the other way around. You should aspire.
You've been there for a long time. Want to be queen of St. Andrews, but yet the problems around you you're not seeing. You can pray yourself out of the problems in St. Andrews. You must.
Some persons were getting pension after 2 terms in office, right? And the persons that work for 26 years plus not getting anything. It's just unfair.
God is good, and God looks after me. You know, not just my wife is no longer here, so both herself and the father up there are looking after me very, very well indeed.
Not a few people that you pick up by the side of the road to run an election, to run in an election. These are not people that you mustered up and you pulled together a few months before you think an election is going to call, and you say we want to win an election, so let's come together.
Don't go there. Should your loved ones pass on, they deserve to be treated with dignity. And at S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, we can provide you with that service. We can take you every step of the way during your sorrowful moments. When that need arises, call S.A. Johnson Funeral Home at 347-777-9797. That's 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home is a Caribbean family-owned funeral home here in Brooklyn, providing funeral services, but in a dignified way. From cremation to burial to the repatriation of your loved ones, you don't have to go through the hassle, as we provide exceptional service that allows you to mourn and heal peacefully. For more information, visit our website, www.sajohnsonfuneral.org. Send us an email at sajfuneral@aol.com or call 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, because you deserve to be treated with dignity. Don't go there.
You are a technocrat. I mean, you can speak to whether or not it was appropriate or inappropriate for that to occur. Would you have done that as a permanent secretary?
Politicians get the information from wherever source that they can.
That's going to be the extent of your answer.
Yeah.
Don't go there.
There's a lot of noise around the data protection bill that, in my respectful view, is not warranted.
I was one of those making noise, and it's simply because I was concerned about that specific section 33.
Don't go there.
Are you going to be offering yourself up as political leader of the party?
I see you've called me have a much more than diplomatic passport. I don't mind that.
Don't go there.
What is the relationship like between you and your leader, Dr. Mitchell, your boss, Dr. Mitchell?
I'm not sure how to explain how to answer this question at this time. I prefer not to answer.
Don't go there.
They said that you approached the bank for the loan before the election and that it only materialized after the election. There are also conflicting reports around the quantity of monies that were received. What is the reality here?
People try to extort the truth and to make all kinds of things about it. I just keep quiet. So if you notice, I was really and truly quiet about the whole matter.
Well, except with not with the New Today newspaper. The New Today newspaper reported on this, so I'm not sure you were quiet on this. Go ahead, Honorable. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just trying to answer your question, right?
Don't go there.
I think we just spoke at length about the regularization framework. So
yes, we did. But let us talk. Let us talk, Prime Minister. Let us talk about the workers who are dismissed.
The Bub Report. We go there.
And viewers and listeners, welcome back to this week's edition of the Bub Report. Now we are joined in the second segment by Assistant Commissioner of Police Trevor Bailey of the Royal St. Vincent and the Grenadines Police Force, whose men led a valiant effort to recapture Grenadian prisoners Ron Mitchell, Trevor Robertson, and Atiba Stanislaus. who investigators suspect might have been responsible for the abduction and murder of 2 sailors on the Catamaran Simplicity. Detectives from St. Vincent and the Grenadines and Grenada were on Friday combing the Catamaran for evidence as they investigate the disappearance of the American sailors. We are also joined by published cruising author Chris Doyle, who has been writing and covering the yachting sector in the Caribbean for close to 50 years. He is the publisher of the yachting digital magazine Doyle Guides and is also a yachting correspondent for Caribbean Compass and writes for the International Yachting Press when asked. Gentlemen, we're happy that you can join us on this week's edition of the Bub Report, albeit under some very difficult circumstances, but we welcome you nonetheless.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Assistant Commissioner of Police Trevor Bailey, I know that this is a busy time for you in respect of crime fighting, so we're happy that you can join us as well, sir.
Yeah, good morning. It's good to be on your program. Pleasant good morning to the viewers, to the people of Grenada, especially my good friend ACP Corwin and ACP Kanat. It's good to be on your program.
Absolutely, very well. Absolutely, sir. Thank you so very much. Now, later in the program, viewers and listeners, we conducted an interview with Mr. Peter David, the Member of Parliament for the town of St. George, to get his reaction to a spate of illegal gun crimes happening in his constituency. That recording will be played after this interview. Now, ACB Bailey, I want to begin with you, sir. Now, of course, this has been a very interesting week in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and let alone Grenada as well. Can you talk about the role that the community of P.T. Bordel played in recapturing the 3 Grenadian fugitives from justice? Now, we always hear about community policing and the role that community can actually play in policing their own communities. And to me, this is perhaps an excellent example of community policing at work.
Indeed. Now, the Royal Savings and Grenadines Police Force commencing January 1, 2024, when we have embarked on a series of walkthroughs and town hall meetings throughout St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And that has the intention of building a closer relationship, a closer bond with our communities. And it bore fruit on Wednesday when we received information with regards to the yacht Simplicity that was docked in the Waterloo Bay area. Our Coast Guard and personnel from our major crime unit went to that yacht, made certain observation, and as a result of the observation, certain information was received. Having received that information, the narcotics section and some members of the rapid response unit were activated to move towards the northern coast town of Petit Bedel, interacted there with residents, and they were pointed in the bushy area of Petit Bedel. And having gone to that area, the 3 Grenadians who would have escaped custody in Robertson, Stannard, Klaus, and Mitchell were recaptured. During that time, Mitchell ran a shot in his leg, and he has since been discharged from the hospital and is presently in police custody. But the community of Petit Bedel and the surrounding areas, on behalf of the government, the Commissioner of Police, and all of citizens and Grenadians, we're extremely grateful for the assistance rendered in ensuring that these fugitives were captured.
Now, were the fugitives just walking around in the community? What did the community observe in respect of these 3 men? Is it that they just saw, well, you all are not part of the community? How did they? How was suspicions raised?
Right. So they were not walking about in the village. They actually occupied an area in the mountain area, not too far from the village. So we will have purchase items from a nearby shop and then retreat into the mountainous area. Yeah. And if something like this, if
yes.
hello, yeah,
Go ahead, sir.
If something like this happen in our area, and the police come knocking and searching, naturally, all people will speak to us.
Mm-hmm.
And more so, the persons who are involved are not locals. So if even though there may be a tendency to be a bit reluctant, if locals were involved, where foreigners are involved, our people will speak to us, and they have spoken.
Now, Assistant Commissioner Bailey, at what point did your lawmen, your investigators, your detectives make a connection between this abandoned catamaran that was poorly anchored, and of course, a skipper noticed that this particular vessel was just out of place in respect of how it was moored, in respect of its moorings. At what point did you make a connection between that catamaran and the escaped fugitives?
Right. Now, after the fugitives were recaptured, they were recaptured with several articles in their possession. Naturally, the police will ask for an account as to who does this belong to and how did you get possession of this. And it is out of that conversation, out of the discovery of these articles with them when they were recaptured, we were able to link directly their connection to the yacht. That coupled with other investigation from the Coast Guard, who was in contact with other yachting personnel, that also with what was found had a direct linkage to the yacht simplicity.
Absolutely. And Assistant Commissioner Bailey, please take a pin here because I do want to bring in Mr. Chris Doyle to this conversation. Mr. Doyle, welcome to the Bob Report. Now, I wish you were here under happier circumstances, sir, to discuss the wonderful and idyllic world of sailing and yachting. But in our conversations yesterday, you indicated how shocked you were by what may have happened to both Kathy and Brandel. Kathy Brandel and Ralph Henry in situations like these is important, of course, to pay tribute who were people to what may have been victims of an awful crime. Now, what have you been able to learn about who Kathy and Ralph were and why they took a liking to Grenada and the Caribbean?
Well, I've been out of the Caribbean this year, but from what I can see, there were regular cruising folk who came down with a cruising group, and they were sailing around. They seemed like very nice people. And I think not just me, but the whole of the community, including the Grenadian community, has been really horrified and shocked by what happened. And that, in a way, is a good thing, because it means it doesn't happen very often, because we are shocked, because this is not normal.
And you say that this is not normal. In my conversation with you yesterday, you said that while this is not normal, it has in fact happened before. Can you talk about yachting safety in respect of that past history in the Caribbean?
Yes, we do get really horrendous things happening from time to time, but they're rare. The last time I remember something really as bad as this was probably about 30 years ago in Barbuda, where some people went on board a yacht. And Barbuda's an island, I think in that time it had no policemen, it was totally peaceful. And the people on the boat were tied up and then executed. And there were 4 of them, as I remember. And that was equally shocking. They were caught and they did go to jail, and one of them died at some point. What was interesting about that case, to me, was that when they analyzed who these people were, the ringleader was someone whose parents had taken him to the States at a really young age, and he'd become criminalized in the States and then exported back to the islands. And I think we're not very able to deal with people that have that kind of experience. We're just not used to it. So that was the last worst one. We have had a few more murders than that. They are not common. And when they strike, it just seems randomly. You can't say this area is dangerous or that area is dangerous. It just happens out of the blue. And it's very unfortunate. And what we are concerned about is that what we want is that it stays extremely rare, that it's not going to become more commonplace. And in that respect, I would just mention that I've known three bad things, 3 yacht hijackings over the years. And I'm an old man, so I was in Grenada in 1969, so this is a long time. That have happened in Grenada. One was a guy called Reg, who had a little boat in the Carenage, and that disappeared one night and was later found with some escaped criminals on board, and he was never seen again. The next was during the Revo days, when a friend of mine had his boat anchored in Prickly Bay, and he was staying ashore, which was lucky for him, because it could have well ended up like this story ended up. But he woke up in the middle of the night, he looked outside, and he saw someone was hoisting the sails on his boat. So he ran down to the boatyard. He alerted the PRG were pretty active in having a military presence around. He activated people, and they got in a boat, and they chased after this boat, and they eventually caught it. And those guys were also escaped from jail. And they had, my memory is that they had actually done some rape and robbery on the way down to the boat. So that's 3 things happening, all associated with people that have escaped the justice system. So one thing we have to do, I think, be very careful of and address is that we are keeping the people that shouldn't be out in public where they're supposed to be locked up. And I believe, apart from these escapees that came out, there was another escapee in Grenada very recently, around the same time, a man who murdered who was suspected of murdering a Canadian, I think in last year. You might know this better than I am, but we have to make sure that we keep people in jail then when that's where they should be.
No disagreements there, and I'm sure ACP Bailey would agree with that. But ACP Bailey, let us continue with this conversation. Now, at what point did you make the connection that these fugitives were actually Grenadian citizens? Were you, because I do know that in the context of the Caribbean, we do have a regional security system, and we do have other methodologies by which law enforcement communicates. So were these 3 escapees on your radar? What conversations were you having with the Royal Grenada Police Force to ensure that one has to be on the lookout for these escapees?
Right. So the information came from Grenada the very next day after they escaped.
Which was the Monday, because they escaped on the Sunday.
So the information came, photographs came, and we in St. Vincent and Grenadines were on alert that they have escaped and they may come this way. So we had their photographs. They were circulated among law enforcement here in St. Vincent and Grenadines to our coastal station and all our operational units. Everyone had their photographs at the station, and even on the mobile phones. The information was well circulated to be on the lookout, because we were of the opinion that they may very well come this side.
So you are of the view that they may very well have been headed to St. Vincent. Now, in respect of the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Coast Guard, were they on the lookout for any suspicious vessels or anything of that sort? What is the surveillance protocol when you get be on the lookout, especially in respect of marine traffic? Be on the lookout warnings.
So you will appreciate that I may not go deep into
absolutely. Absolutely.
Right, but
you understand.
Right, but our Coast Guard, we have a sub-base of our Coast Guard on one of the Grenadine Islands, Catamaran. So our people were on the lookout for any boat, any craft that was suspicious. So we were checking to see if, and we were monitoring the movements of boats on our waters, and we were really out looking for. But never did we know that they were not on, let's say, a regular speedboat, but they were actually cruising through our waters on board a yacht. That didn't belong to them.
On board a yacht at high speeds as well, at maximum speeds, 30 knots, which again, Mr. Doyle can provide some context here, because I was able to see some of the conversation around that, and I learned so much about cruising speeds of yachts and things like that, which was very fascinating. But Mr. Doyle, I'll bring you back. Now, in respect of the ongoing investigation, Mr. Bailey, reporting suggests that two of the men perhaps confessed to committing acts of violence against the two purported victims here. Let's. You
Right,
want to
so
comment on what they have been saying to you?
I can confirm to you that all three Grenadians have been electronically interviewed. That is, the interview that was conducted by law enforcement with them, it was audio and video recorded. And these interviews were done in conjunction with members of the Royal Grenadian Police Force, who are still here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines as we speak, conducting the investigation alongside us here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. They have been electronically interviewed, and everything that was said by them, it has been recorded electronically. The utterances, there has been some admissions, and I do not want to go into, and respectfully, cannot go into details, but to say they have been electronically interviewed and their recordings are intact.
In respect of the charging process, now I know that in respect of our common law, you can only hold suspects for a certain amount of time before pressing charges. Where is that? And jurisdictionally, how would that work, given that there may be some cross-border issues in respect of how these events unfolded?
Right. So sometime tomorrow, tomorrow being Monday, sometime tomorrow, the Grenadians will be taken before our court here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. They'll be charged for some immigration violation, and they may very well be a criminal charge for another offense. They will go before our court tomorrow. With regards to the cross-border issues and as to jurisdiction, we are in conversation, and we're working assiduously to have those issues resolved. Searches has been conducted by air, the regional security system. They have done some flying. Our Coast Guard has done some checking. Unfortunately, we have not discovered the bodies of the two missing persons. We are hopeful that we may be able to recover the remains. Our sympathies goes out to the family and relatives of the missing persons. The legal process, there are some challenges, and I'm sure that we'll be able to work together in overcoming these issues. But as it stands now, the men will be appearing before a magistrate court here in St. Vincent sometime tomorrow.
Now, you said that there are challenges with the legal process. Can you articulate what those are without going into specific details if you don't want to?
Right.
Are you talking about jurisdictional challenges, or when you say
correct,
challenges?
correct.
Yes.
Jurisdiction, not necessarily legal, but jurisdiction. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So there are some jurisdictional challenges. Now, in respect of the state of the Catamaran, I do know that your lawman and has been looking at what has happened to the vessel there and what might have gone down. Reporting suggests that lots of blood was found there. Can you talk about the extent of, I don't want to say morbidity, but the extent of ransacking or the state of the vessel that you found it in?
Right. So the yacht has been processed forensically. It has been photographed, sample has been taken. There's evidence that there struggle on board. There was the presence of blood. There seemed to have had persons seem to have spent a lot of time on the yacht because there's evidence, there are signs that things were thrown about in the cabin of the boat. So we have done the processing as detailed as we can alongside the authorities from Grenada as well. And we have collected several samples from that yacht. Yeah.
So evidence of a struggle, evidence that some of violent activities, interaction between the victims and the suspect there. And I'm sure the suspects are still assisting you in their investigations. Have they been cooperative? Have they been cooperative in answering all of your questions?
They have been cooperative. They have been cooperative. Yesterday as well, we met with relatives of the missing persons, and they would have assisted us tremendously in the sense that they were shown some items that they readily identify as property belonging to the missing persons. So we have moved from suspicion to confirmation that these property belong to the persons who are missing and would have been on board of the yacht at some stage. So the investigation is progressing nicely.
Absolutely. And of course, Mr. Bailey, I would get back to you for some closing comments, but we certainly, of course, the people of Grenada are high in praise. The comments are coming in here in respect of the quick work of the Royal St. Vincent and the Grenadines Police Service in solving, police force in solving this matter. Although we really hoped that the ending would have been a happier ending than what you are sharing with us today. So certainly we are going to come back to you, sir, for some closing comments. But I want to bring back Mr. Doyle here. Mr. Doyle, you've been hearing the conversation I've been having here with the Assistant Commissioner of Police out there in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Anything you want to piggyback on?
Well, I think, as you were saying, they deserve a lot of praise. Also, the people that helped them in rounding up these criminals. I think that's very good, because when you get fast police action like that, it stops further damage. And these guys are now arrested. I don't think we're going to see them loose again anytime soon. I certainly hope not. So this incident, in a sense, is coming to a conclusion, but it's left an emotional problem, I think, for everyone in the Caribbean, because suddenly when a thing like this happens, you feel very vulnerable. And I think it is like a bolt of lightning. It comes from nowhere, it happens, and is gone again for a very long time until the next one happens. We certainly don't want to see them happening any faster. I don't think that because this happened that Grenada has suddenly become unsafe or anything like that. But, you know, anywhere in the world you are, and when you're cruising on a boat, you have to be somewhat self-reliant. And there's no way the police in any of these islands can absolutely ensure your safety. So you have to be prepared to be self-sufficient in this respect. Luckily, it's very rarely needed. So Grenada has a murder rate of about 4 per 100,000, which is about half that of the United States and maybe a quarter that of Trinidad. So it's certainly not going to suddenly become an unsafe island because this happened. But we all have to be aware of the realities of modern society. One of the things that worries me a little bit, and I think you may be talking about this later, you were talking about gun crime, maybe later in this section,
yes,
is there seems to have been an influx, and this is a problem in America, very lax gun laws as far as I can see, of guns flowing down in the Caribbean. And this is a somewhat worrying situation.
Mm-hmm. Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm just saying that.
Yes.
So, I mean, me personally, I would not be personally worried for my safety in Grenada at this point if I was sailing around, because these guys have been apprehended, they're gone, and the situation really hasn't changed. And these things do happen in the Caribbean, but they just happen very occasionally, and when they happen, they're really shocking, and there's no way to predict them. So these are just jokers out there in the pack of cards that we really have no control over. But they don't really alter the situation fundamentally.
Yep, absolutely. And of course, Mr. Bailey, I do want to respect your time, sir, because I do know that your specific area of responsibility is crime in the way that your colleague in Grenada, Assistant Superintendent Vanny Cohen, is also crime, matters of crime. In respect of the Coast Guard assistance or the Coast Guard response in respect of attempting to recover the remains of these two victims, where are we with that?
Right. So we have not been able to identify specifically where the bodies were thrown overboard. Yeah? And that presents a challenge. Hence the reason why we sought the assistance of the RSS, their air wing, to do some flying for us. And that has not yielded any fruits in terms of the discovery of the bodies. When the Coast Guard would have gone out, they would have even done some diving. It has not yielded any positive results.
So, are you saying then that the suspects gave you a good indication as to where they threw the victims' bodies overboard?
Without going too much into details,
yes, sir.
As I said, they have been cooperating, and an attempt has been made to try and narrow as far as practicable the area where this incident took place, and some effort has been made, but unfortunately, as regards to up to this time, we have not retrieved the bodies.
ACP Bailey, thank you so much for having this conversation with us. Is there any final comments before we get to the next segment? This is certainly a heart-wrenching story, and our hearts here go out to the family of the deceased. We understand that the family, they were saving for many years for this once-in-a-lifetime trip to Grenada and to the Caribbean to participate in a yachting rally, I believe, that started last year. And so this was a once-in-a-lifetime trip for them, and for it to end this way, it's certainly extremely heart-wrenching. I just can't imagine what the family is experiencing right now.
Right. So I just want to thank you for having me on the program. I say to my counterparts in Grenada that we will continue to work alongside each other in the best interest of our citizens. We put our lives on the line every day for the security of citizens of Grenada and St. Vincent and the Grenadines and visitors alike. Again, our deepest sympathies and condolences to the family of these two missing persons, but law enforcement has a job to do, and we are committed to the task in doing that which we are charged to do, and we will continue to do the work in the best interest of justice for all in St. Vincent and in Grenada.
Absolutely. ACP Bailey, One Caribbean, indeed. And this case is a demonstration of the One Caribbean spirit that I believe law enforcement, we talk about regional integration all the time without having an appreciation for the fact that law enforcement is living and breathing regional integration in many respects. So thank you again, sir.
Much obliged. Thanks much.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Viewers and listeners, ACP Trevor Bailey, who is the Assistant Commissioner of Police responsible for crime and criminal activity in neighboring St. Vincent and the Grenadines. He was able to give us an update in respect of the ongoing investigation in the circumstances that led to the untimely demise of two sailors who were murdered by three escaped prisoners from the South St. George police station in St. George's, Grenada. As a programming note, we did reach the Community Relations Department of the Royal Grenada Police Force to get a comment or to invite them to the Bub Report. Unfortunately, they have not responded to our calls. We have been inviting ACP Vanny Cohen to the Bub Report on several occasions. Also, when we call him, he does not return our calls. But Mr. Doyle, over to you for some closing comments.
Well, I've been sailing in the islands, and particularly Grenada, where I'm a resident, for a huge number of years. And there are always some security issues. And what's happened recently is people have become very much more conscious of these than in the early days, because we have things like, we have the safety and security net, which details every little thing that happens to any yacht. Mm-hmm. And I think yachts people have become more concerned and worried about security than they ever were. This kind of situation, of course, makes that worry much worse. But if I look at it overall, I'm not sure that, in fact, crime is really getting any worse over the years I've been here than it was when I first arrived, especially towards yachts people, and given the number of yachts people there were when I was first here and the number we have now. I think all these islands are still fairly safe.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you brought up safety and security net, Mr. Doyle, because actually, and I'm going to share this with the viewers. I've learned so much about yachting in the last few days, sir. It's very interesting. But I will share this site now in respect of the safety and security net. So talk to me about the genesis of such a website, or the need for such a website. Is it because not in the context of Grenada, but in the wider Caribbean, sailors have started to get concerned about what has been happening in open sea?
I think this is a chicken and egg question. I think probably sailors were a lot less concerned when they weren't aware. Mm-hmm. One thing about knowing about every disaster that's happening to every person where you are is that you think the world's a lot less safe than it really is. We know this from people that watch a lot of television and crime on television. If you look at the statistics, they think the world is much worse than it is. And
the sky is falling.
Right. And I think there's two things about this. The safety and security net, I do not think arrived because of a demand for yachtsmen, but someone wanted to do it and they did it. And I think it does actually, it's good to have. Information is always good to have, and they try to do as good a job as they can. But I think that awareness also makes people perhaps more worried about how things are than they should. I notice we get any little crime that happens in a place, in another island, like St. Vincent, for example, and all over the social media, don't go to that island, it's dangerous. And this is kind of out of proportion to what the reality is.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Now let's see if we have some viewer questions here, because of course, some viewers, we do have active viewers in the chat here. There was a question, I believe, that was directed to you, Mr. Doyle, that I'm trying to get to. And I believe the question really has to do with hotspots. Are there any sailing hotspots in respect of safety in the Caribbean that you are concerned about?
I think, you know, what's happened, there are places that I worry about a little bit. For example, I think St. Lucia is a perfectly safe island to go there, and I love sailing there. But they have a long coastline, and there are people that are running drugs. And I would be a little bit worried about anchoring on my own in some of the deserted bays on the west coast of St. Lucia. In the main harbors, absolutely no problem. Other hotspots, well, Venezuela, of course, so that's getting out of our area, but that's really become no-go now. But what I'm saying is, when something terrible like this happens, it strikes anywhere, and you don't know where it's going to strike. And as someone that would like to keep people safe, this has always been a problem, because you can't say this area is safe when you're safe if you're here and you're not safe. But that's the way it is. And there is a certain randomness to this that we can't control. And it's not like these people were in Grenada. It's a very safe place. So this thing happened. So that is a hard one to answer. I think, although I like to be on my own in certain anchorages, if people are at all nervous, go to an anchorage where there are quite a few other boats, not be completely on your own. That would be a little bit safer.
Absolutely. Mr. Doyle, any final comments from you before we get to the final segment of the program?
No, well, I'm really glad they caught these guys. And I really hope that the other prisoner that's on the loose gets quickly back in jail, so we don't have to worry about him. We're certainly not going to worry about these ones, because I think they're going to be tied up for quite a while. And I know it hurts everyone, not only the yachting community, the Grenadians, they're all hurt by this. And I hope we get over it soon and get back to more normal times.
Mr. Doyle and ACP Bailey, thank you, gentlemen, for appearing on this week's edition of the Bub Report.
You're welcome.
Absolutely. Viewers and listeners, we are going to take a quick break, and we're going to play the final segment of this program. It is a pre-recorded interview we had with the Member of Parliament for the town of St. George, the Honorable Peter David. Now, the yachting incident, while that has taken up a lot of oxygen in the room, proverbially speaking, there were also two gun-related incidents in Grenada last week, one in the south of the island, in the vicinity of the Vendors Market, and the other in the town of St. George. Now, gun-related incidents in the town of St. George is of concern to residents of the town of St. George, as well as to the Member of Parliament for the area. So we're going to take a quick break and be right back with that conversation that we had with Mr. Peter David. Please stay.
Should your loved ones pass on, they deserve to be treated with dignity. And at S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, we can provide you with that service. We can take you every step of the way during your sorrowful moments. When that need arises, call S.A. Johnson Funeral Home at 347-777-9797. That's 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home is a Caribbean family-owned funeral home here in Brooklyn, providing funeral services, but in a dignified way. From cremation to burial to the repatriation of your loved ones, you don't have to go through the hassle, as we provide exceptional service that allows you to mourn and heal peacefully. For more information, visit our website, www.sajohnsonfuneral.org. Send us an email at sajfuneral@aol.com or call 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, because you deserve to be treated with dignity.
Viewers and listeners, before we go to the next segment of the Bub Report, we were actually joined by the Member of Parliament for the town of St. George, the Honorable Peter David. Mr. David was unfortunately unable to join us live on this week's episode of the Bub Report. However, we sat with him for a pre-interview conversation in which he discussed the issues of gun crime plaguing his own constituency. Within the last 3 months, there has been reports of several gun-related incidents that Mr. David also addressed with elder members of his constituency. And we were able to have this conversation with Mr. David, which we will play for you now. Mr. Peter David, the Member of Parliament for the town of St. George, welcome to this week's episode of the Bub Report.
Thank you, Kellen. It's always a pleasure to be with you and to have these discussions. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Now, as you're aware, this was a blockbuster week for Grenada, not necessarily a good blockbuster week in respect of the escaped prisoners, not only 3 prisoners, but in fact 4 prisoners, 3 of whom are suspected. Again, they are still suspected to be responsible for the alleged disappearance of the 2 sailors. I wanted to react to some of the events that has been happening in Grenada over the last week.
Yeah, well, first of all, Kellen, let me express my absolute sympathy to the families, not only the families of the persons who appear to have died on the yacht. And I must say that I hope that that's not true. Up to now, the bodies have not been found. I pray to God that maybe they can find them alive somewhere. But in the event, I just want to express my absolute sympathy with them and to all other victims of crime, and particularly gun crime in Grenada. I have represented both sides, victims and accused persons, and it's always devastating to the families. On one side, seeing mothers who take care of their kids, and then the kids get involved in violence and end up out of Majesty's prisons or in some other problems. And it's always devastating to families. So for me, I have been very, very close to this over the years. I've represented persons who have been victims of crime and who I have had to assist in getting some kind of counseling. And so I just want to start by saying that crime, while to some people it's a show and some people just chat about it, they're actual victims in these cases, and I think we have to look at that. And I want to express my deepest condolences to those who have died, and my best wishes to families who are plagued by that disease. I want to say, Kellen, that gun crime in particular, we've had it in our country in an escalating manner over the last couple of months. And I think we need to find the solutions. It's unfortunate that we have not had the leadership to help us find these solutions. But I want to simply say that this issue, crime in general, is a development issue. Apart from the devastation to families, it's also a development issue. Investment is affected by it. Tourism is affected by it. Agriculture is affected by it. Every aspect of our society is affected by crime. And unfortunately, we are heading in a particular direction. I must say that over the last 20 years, I've always, in my visits to countries, in my discussions as foreign minister, as somebody who's been a tourism minister, I've always said, we are really fortunate. In fact, we said we are blessed to have Trinidad in the south, St. Vincent across there, St. Lucia there, plagued by crime, and we could boast we have low crime rate. And I still think we'd be able to boast of that in the future, but for now, that is a concern. And I think that is why I am particularly perturbed by the fact that there does not seem to be much concern expressed by the government, concern expressed by those in authority about the impact gun crime is going to have on the resources that are available to us for other developmental objectives. St. George's University will be affected by gun crime. Remember what happened in St. Vincent? When St. Vincent was plagued by crime some years ago, they had a branch of SGU in St. Vincent, and they lost it because of crime in St. Vincent.
And they moved to Grenada as a result.
And they moved to Grenada, that we always had, but they moved that unit to Grenada. So we must be very careful, and all of us, NGOs, churches, all of us have to be concerned. But we are all looking to the government to see leadership. And I have not seen that leadership being expressed by them, and the concern and the empathy and the sympathy being expressed by them in this regard. I don't want to politicize crime. Crime is not a partisan political issue. All of us must be working to find solutions. But we all as a nation are looking to our political leaders for some kind of guidance, some kind of expression of hope on the way forward to get us out of this.
Mm-hmm. Now, you talk about leadership, and now the counter argument would be, well, the Prime Minister and Minister of National Security may say, well, he has a hands-off approach, and he's allowing law enforcement to do what law enforcement should be doing without interference from the political directorate.
Well,
what say you?
Therein lies the problem. You can't have a hands-off approach to a major development issue. You have to have a hands-on approach. You have to have sleepless nights looking for solutions. You have to sit with law enforcement, and you have to invite in other stakeholders into the discussion. Invite the churches, invite the opposition, invite the NGOs, invite the community leaders. You cannot have a hands-off approach to say, well, you know, I don't want to interfere. Yes, you have to interfere in matters of that magnitude. It's like Hurricane Ivan. What if the government had said, well, I want a hands-off approach in dealing with Hurricane Ivan? No. Hurricane Ivan devastated the country, and the government at the time, led by Dr. Mitchell, had a very much hands-on approach. I think crime must be seen in a similar way. It is not a police issue. The police is just one aspect of dealing with crime. The communities have to be involved in dealing with crime. The churches have to be involved. The NGOs have to be involved. All of us, the opposition, the government. So no, to talk about a hands-off approach and don't want to interfere, therein lies the problem. Therein lies the problem. You know, one of the big problems we have with gun violence is alienation of the youth. There are many youth who don't see a future. You know, many youth who come to me and say, Mr. David, I want to help to open a pig farm or a chicken farm. And if they can't get that kind of help, they sit on the block all day. And you know what they say about the devil and idle hands. And that is what is happening to the government. I'm not putting all the responsibility on the government. Mark you, as I said, I am not attempting to politicize it. It is a national problem, but we have national leadership, and that national leadership cannot say hands off, because then what happens? If there is no leadership on the issue, then everybody say, you know what, I'll just go in my corner, which is what happens. That is the beginning of a deterioration of our society, and everybody goes into their house, put up all the bars, put up rotan. We get like Trinidad and Tobago, everybody lock into the little cubicle and try to survive. We are a peace-loving people. We are a people that are known to be very friendly. We do not want to go down that road. So I urge our leadership. And when I say our leadership, I don't only speak of government leadership. I speak of our community leaders. I speak of our church leaders, the bishop, the archdeacons, the pastors, all of our people to come together. Let us find national solution. I'll say this, Kellen. I had a conversation with the Prime Minister of St. Lucia while he was in Grenada for 50th anniversary, and he was expressing to me some of the concerns he had about crime in St. Lucia. I was absolutely shocked. I mean, I sat with him on 2 mornings, and on both mornings, you know, he said that he just got reports of some killings. And we both spoke about this issue, that we need, he was saying that he plans to invite his opposition into some discussion on it. And I also believe that. I also said that I think that's a good idea. And we too should be involved with the government in these discussions. So it is something that we all, and that brings me to the view that it's a Caribbean-wide problem. So we need to discuss it with our Caribbean friends, you know, in through the CARICOM mechanism. Crime is a development issue. If we have high crime, investors do not come, tourists do not come, our products from the farmers are affected because they are not able to sell through the tourism sector. Crime filters down in very negative ways to all sections of our society. So let us sound the alarm. Let us get hold of it before we get like Trinidad and Tobago, where, you know, deaths come like nothing. Every day report 2 or 3 deaths as well. Only 2 today, only 3 today. No, we don't want to get like that. Fortunately, we are still away from that. Let us stop it before we get to that point.
And speaking of attempting to stop crime and gun-related incidents, of course, within the context of your own constituency in the town of St. George, last week as well, we did see gun-related incidents in the Four Roads area. A couple of months ago in December, we also saw gun-related incidents on the Carenage. Fortunately, there were no tragedies involving those gun-related incidents. But the mere fact that people are brandishing these weapons, shooting up these weapons without any care for accountability. In fact, you held meetings with community leaders in your own constituency. Can you talk about the scope and context of this issue within your constituency and what constituents are saying about it?
Yes, in my constituency, we have these pockets of young people who sometimes tend to go off track. We had some gun violence. We had some of the young people shooting off guns in the air, I think it was, at the time. And we were very concerned. In fact, many of the elderly in the constituency called me and said we need to get a hold on this. And I had meetings with several of these young people from both the center of the town, what we call the Four Roads area, and on the Carenage. We had meetings with the Archdeacon Marshall from the Anglican Church and my dear friend Bud Bradford, who is a prominent physician from the Carenage area. And we had good discussions with the youth. Coming out of it, the youth expressed concerns that there was not enough facilities for young people. For example, the youth on the Carenage side spoke about a community center where they can gather and do good things. The youth in Four Roads similarly have been trying to work on the backstreet basketball court. In fact, we are moving to do some things there to provide a place for them to community. So we had some good discussions. For me, the issue was simply a lot of alienation among these young people. When you get to know these kids, they're not bad kids. They simply went off the track. We have to find ways back. That is why during our administration, we had the Empower program and several other programs. Persons like Kate Lewis have been speaking about that a lot these days. These programs that get our youth active in positive things, because at the end of the day, if all they do is every day wake up, sit on the block, talk to each other, find mischief, again, the devil finds work for the idle hands. So what it told me and what it told us is we need to intervene more. We can't simply continue to blame the youth. The youth are entering into a society that we have built for them. They didn't create the environment that exists. We created it. That is why all of us, and I keep repeating it, have to sit and talk about crime. Not simply the context of send them to jail, because they will come back out of jail. And that brings me to another issue. We need to find ways to reform our prisons. And I know a lot of work has been done over the years. My good friend Leon Cornwall and people like that have been working to rehabilitate people at Her Majesty's prison. But one of the problems we have is that people get up to jail, and the jail sometimes becomes an incubator for other crime waves when persons come out of prisons. I have been doing as much as I can. The police are well aware that I have assisted them in getting back many guns. In fact, I always speak to my clients, any one of them involved in crime, and they know that, and the police can tell everybody that I work assiduously to try to take guns off the street. So while I represent clients with guns, I use that representation to assist in getting guns off the street, because I have a personal view that the more the fact that all these guns exist, we must find a way to get them off the streets and get them out of the hands of the young people. And I do as much as I can in that regard. So yes, the meetings I had were very productive, Kellan.
Mm-hmm. Now, speaking of getting guns off the streets, now you said you spoke with some of these young people. Have you thought of perhaps a gun amnesty working in tandem with the Royal Grenadian Police Force for the town of St. George?
While I was in government, before I suggested it to government, I've always suggested that when you raise it to the police, some of the police say there have been amnesties in the past and it has not worked. I believe we need to keep trying. I believe we need to have these amnesties. Maybe, I know in the US, Kellan, where you live, they offer money reward. They buy the guns from them. In Grenada, we just want them to bring it in. In the US, I think that didn't work. So what they did was offer a financial incentive to get the guns. So you pay people the price of the gun. So maybe we need to find creative ways. And that is the point I'm making, Kellen. These discussions need to take place between the government, law enforcement, communities, churches, and so on, to find ways to buy back these guns, take them off the street, and after that, find ways to block the holes that is causing the U.S. guns from the U.S. Because remember, Kellen, we don't produce guns. Guns are shipped down from the north. And these guns are coming through some of our ports, through our evading customs authorities. We need to close the gap by having metal detectors and all of these things installed so that we can stop the supply of guns. Some group or some bodies, some people are making money off of selling guns, just like you have in the US. It's big business. I suspect that there are persons in Grenada who are importing guns to sell to these young people. These young people don't import the guns. They don't manufacture guns. Guns end up in their hands through persons who have the capacity to import these guns.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of guns, now in the last budget debate, and this is where we would end this conversation with you, the Honorable Prime Minister, who is the Minister of National Security, he said this in respect of perhaps getting to terms with the fact that crime would eventually make its way to the shores of Grenada in respect of gun violence. Let's play this clip.
From the time I've been in office, I've been saying this. Not because I have premonition, Mr. Speaker, because it is clear the trend is obvious. Anybody who's reading the statistics on crime in the Caribbean will see that gun crime is a pandemic in the region, and that it was just going to be a matter of time before it reached our shores. That has nothing to do with the Prime Minister who holds the position of Minister of National Security. It has to do with the fact that we live close to the United States, we're located in a transshipment area, drugs going north or to Europe. And the Americans themselves have said to us, the more drug interdiction there is the higher the gun crime. Because the criminals now are fighting for turf. So when we talk about the need to strengthen our firearms act.
And Mr. MP, that was the Honorable Prime Minister there. I want to get your reaction. Of course, this was at the last budget debate.
I'm a bit surprised at a couple of things. One, he says it has nothing to do with Minister of National Security, something like that. It has everything to do with leadership, because what that statement told me is that we are well aware. Long before we got here, we are well aware of the possibilities. We need to know that that awareness led to some preparation and some kinds of discussion with the national security apparatus as to how we are going to deal with what he said was an inevitable rise in gun crime. The inevitability of it should have led the government to be well prepared to respond, but up until today, we have no response. So that absolutely shocks me. In addition to that, he seemed to make the point as if, listen, man, there's nothing we can do. The gun crime is going to come. We all need to just go down in our bunkers. No. We want to see leadership to find solutions, not leadership that just tells us there is going to be a problem. If you know there's a hurricane coming, you warn people about the hurricane, but you also advise them what to do in the event of the coming of the hurricane. I didn't hear anything, and to date, I have heard nothing about what do we do when the crime, which he said, of gun violence would come. What we do. What you should do is give the problem and give us some prescriptions. And I am saying that in this context, we don't have all day to discuss this thing, Kellan, but I am saying that we need to come together. If the government is not going to lead, then we need to find leaders among the churches, among the communities, in any way we can find leadership, because this is a crisis that is going to have devastating effects on our people psychologically and our economy in terms of our ability to finance our development. We should be focused now on healthcare. We should be focused on education. We should be focused on those things to cause our people to develop rather than having to look at gun crime. And knowing since last year that the government had the view that this was coming, according to our Prime Minister, you can't take a hands-off approach. You can't say, well, in a way that makes it seem as though you're leaving it up to the people. You have to find ways, and if you don't do it, then allow other people to lead to find solutions. And don't keep blaming the LNP and blaming me. All we are trying to do is offer solutions. I'm tired of the partisanship on every issue. And I expect there will be partisanship on that side coming to us and saying, well, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. Listen, you've been in government for nearly 2 years. It is your government now. The problem is in your lap. You deal with it, or you let somebody else deal with it. And that is my comment. And I fully support whatever efforts the government would make. We give a commitment. The government comes with some solutions and they want us to participate in it. We will participate in it. The question is, where are these proposals for us to consider? There are none, and that is an abdication of the responsibility. It's our right to have a safe environment, and we are not seeing the plans to have that afforded to the population.
Mr. David, thank you so very much. This is certainly a very important conversation that we will continue to have, but hopefully it is not a conversation that will be a perennial conversation. We ought to arrest this and ensure that Grenada can maintain its reputation as one of the most peaceful islands, not only the Caribbean, but in the world. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Killer, and thanks again for having me. Much appreciated.
Absolutely. Viewers and listeners, Mr. Peter David, the Member of Parliament for the town of St. George. We are going to take our quick break now and come back with the...
Don't go there.
You are a technocrat. I mean, you can speak to whether or not it was appropriate or inappropriate for that to occur. Would you have done that as a permanent secretary?
Politicians get the information from wherever source that they can.
That's going to be the extent of your answer.
Yeah.
Don't go there.
There's a lot of noise around the data protection bill that, in my respectful view, is not warranted.
I was one of those making noise, and it's simply because I was concerned about that specific section 33.
Don't go there.
Are you going to be offering yourself up as political leader of the party?
I see you've called me here for much more than diplomatic passports. I don't mind that.
Don't go there.
What is the relationship like between you and your leader, Dr. Mitchell, your boss, Dr. Mitchell?
I'm not sure how to explain how to answer this question at this time. I prefer not to answer.
Don't go there.
They said that you approached the bank for the loan before the election and that it only materialized after the election. There are also conflicting reports around the quantity of monies that were received. What is the reality here?
People try to extort the truth and to make all kinds of things about it. I just keep quiet. So if you notice, I was really and truly quiet about the whole matter.
Well, except with not with the New Today newspaper. The New Today newspaper reported on this, so I'm not sure you were quiet on this. Go ahead, Honorable. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just trying to answer your question, right?
Don't go there.
I think we just spoke at length about the regularization framework. So
yes, we did. But let us talk, Prime Minister. Let us talk about the workers who are dismissed.
The Bub Report. We go there.
And viewers and listeners, thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the Bub Report. We thank all of you for your constructive comments, at least those comments that were constructive in the chat. And certainly, if you have not had the chance to share this program, please ensure that you share this program so that others can have an opportunity to listen to this very important conversation we had on this week's edition of the Bub Report. We work hard to ensure that the Bub Report remains of a particular quality and standard. We are unbought, unbiased, and we are independent. On behalf of the producers of this program, I'm your humble host, Dr. Kellen Bub, wishing everyone a pleasant week. Take care now. Bye-bye.